Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, a very important topic that we have picked up for discussion is about the ongoing tussle between United States of America and China. Whether you talk about the trade war, or perhaps you talk about the Cold War, or you talk about some threats in the South China Sea, you talk about the Taiwan issue, you talk about the overall expansion plan of China, you talk about BRI, you talk about CPEC, you talk about the Chinese development in the field of defense. A lot of concerns are there by the Americans. Now it seems that when we heard around 25 years ago that this century is going to be the century of Asia, it was an absolutely correct statement. The way these countries, they have progressed, the way they have become the economic giants, whether you talk about Japan or you talk about China in particular, or so many other Far Eastern countries, it was perhaps I would say an unbelievable move when it comes to it. The way the Chinese, in fact, the way they moved forward, especially post 1980, that's an unbelievable story. Almost 60 to 65 crore people, just imagine 650 million plus people, in fact, who were below the poverty line, in fact, now are above the certain level, and I think they are progressing in the right direction. But still, there are a lot of problems. Today, there was this news that Mr. Xi Jinping is going to be the head for a lifetime. So, consistency is going to be there. A certain, I would say, platform that has been given, and now it is up to them how to capitalize on that. We'll be talking about that in detail, but before I introduce you to our panelist, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
China's top Communist Party leaders passed an important resolution on 11th November 2021, which highlighted the party's achievement and historical experiences since it was founded 100 years ago. This resolution was passed at the end of a 4-day closed-door meeting of more than 300 top leaders on its central committee. This meeting, known as the 6th Plenum, elevated the role of Xi Jinping by declaring him as the main innovator and acclaiming his thoughts, declaring as a new era of socialism with Chinese characteristic. The communique regarding this resolution was published by the official Xinhua news agency, stated that the party has solved many tough problems that were long on the agenda but never resolved, and accomplished many things that were wanted but never got done. This resolution was the third of its kind in 100 years history of China. The previous two resolutions were issued under former leaders Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping. This resolution paved the way for Xi Jinping's third term in the president's office, which will raise his position as China's most powerful leader since Mao. Indeed, Xi Jinping in his 2 terms faced and dealt many challenges, most prominently the trade war with the United States, which was rebuffed under Xi Jinping's leadership by introducing the dual circulation strategy. Political manipulation of the coronavirus pandemic by the Western powers was another challenge for Xi Jinping, which was tackled by China by not only recovering faster from this pandemic as well as by its robust vaccine diplomacy.
Now to talk about this very important issue, we have with us on my right in the studio is Lieutenant General retired Talat Masood Saab, senior analyst, columnist, writer. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, General Saab. And we also have with us on Skype from Paris, France, Mr. Karel Vereycken. He is the political analyst of the Schiller Institute. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. I hope I have pronounced your name correctly, sir.
It's okay.
All right. And we also have with us Dr. Zeng. She is the assistant professor of SISU, Shanghai International Studies University. She's joining us from Shanghai, China. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time also. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Jalsa, now the issue as far as United States of America and China is concerned, sir, it is very obvious. Initially, we thought that perhaps there are issues, whether you talk about trade or you talk about the South China Sea or you talk about the Indian Ocean perhaps or the Taiwan issue and so on and so forth. Now, sir, things are very clear, especially when you talk about the AUKUS that has been recently developed, and then we also learned that 8 submarines, nuclear powered submarines would be in fact assembled with the help of the British and the
Australia.
overall cost is going to be around 60 billion. But sir, having said that, that's great, because Australia never had these kind of designs, always wanted that peace should be there in the region. But sir, I was also watching a program, 60 Minutes Australia, in which one thing which really surprised me, that just because of this current tussle between USA and China, sir, around 20 to 25 billion dollars worth of, I would say, loss is incurring on yearly basis as far as Australia is concerned. And there are so many other issues, sir. Don't you think, sir, things could have been sorted out, and whatever is being done is to control the Chinese? Perhaps this is the Western point of view, but that is not the right approach for many of those, I would say, analysts who in fact back the Chinese point of view. Sir, your take.
Well, I think it is very simple to understand, in the sense that America feels that if there is any country in the world today which is likely to threaten it in the next decade or 2 decades, then it is China, the way it is rising, the way its economic power is growing, and also its military power is growing, and the way that it has also been able to develop technology, although in the beginning it had to take a lot of help from outside, but now it's fairly self-sustaining. So they don't want anyone to challenge their supremacy, and so that is how the tussle has started. And they also think that it is not just a question of financial supremacy or power supremacy, it is also a question of ideology. They think that if China were to dominate and be the supreme power, or be an equal power with China after 1 or 2 decades, then it's very much possible that communism, or the type of the philosophy of the Chinese, will spread over the world. So I think it is also a question of the doctrines of the 2 countries being very dissimilar. So I think you should look at it in this way, that over the centuries, countries which have challenged the bigger power have always been again got into sort of a tussle with the major power. But I think China is very determined. China will defy this policy of America. China has been trying to tell the American leadership that you don't have to worry, we are trying to only develop our economy. The president of China has even said, to the extent that we accept your supremacy and we will continue to do that for years, and but yet of course they do not accept that statement, and they think that China, of course, the moment it is in a position, it will obviously dominate the world. And then the monopoly that the US has today as the sole superpower would not be there.
So you believe, sir, the Chinese, I would say, sir, they have already become an economic giant, and they have already challenged the Americans. But sir, one quick comment, and then I'll go over to our friend in France. So let's suppose, you think, sir, this AUKUS is a signal of power shift in Asia Pacific, to be particular, sir?
No, I think these countries are also, from their own point of view, have always aligned themselves with the West. And they also think that with the rise of China, their position is also threatened. So they feel that by aligning themselves or having an alliance with the US, they will be in a position to somehow retain their independence and not be totally dominated by China. And will also be a beneficiary of US assistance in terms of defense, in terms of an economic sort of betterment. So I think these are the considerations on the basis of which these countries have aligned themselves. Then they are, of course, ideologically the same. They believe in democracy, and they are democratic countries.
All right, sir. Now coming to you, Mr. Karel, the point is now, since we do understand, sir, every almost 6th man in the world, or perhaps every 5th man in the world is a Chinese, I mean, you go to any American university, sir, you'll find at least 30% Chinese students in the class. I mean, this is a reality. The way the Chinese have progressed, it's unbelievable. I think, I mean, it's worth doing a PhD on their fundamentals. But, sir, looking at the current development, I mean, the Americans, they still try to impose sanctions on countries like Russia or perhaps China. I mean, you can't undermine them. At the same time, sir, it seems that the shift is towards the Asia side, and now it's almost impossible to stop the Chinese economic growth. The other day I was reading an article that perhaps they have the top of the line navy as compared, though they do not have so many aircraft carriers. But sir, when you look at their nuclear submarines, the kind of technology they have introduced, the kind of Air Force indigenously made planes and jets and missile systems and whatnot, don't you think that is a potential threat for the Americans? This is what they believe in. Perhaps Chinese were never hostile towards any other country, sir. Your take?
Well, my take is that the biggest threat, there's an echo, the biggest threat to the US security is the way the US behaves by itself.
Absolutely.
What I mean with that is that up till the 1960s, there was this policy of containment to contain communist expansion. After, there was this crazy idea of rollback, which was not only to contain communism, but to kick them out of the countries where they were. And in a sense, if you look to the foreign policies, which goes from even from the Bill Clinton administration through the Bush and Obama, Trump and Biden, actually the foreign policy is run by the State Department and by the Pentagon, and they need an enemy. They are spending $600-700 billion a year on military spending on defense, and you can only justify such a spending by having an enemy. If Russia and China are becoming partners in mutual development, then all this money and these people should find another job. And that's exactly what we should work on. And Australia is a masochistic case because Australia is its main interest and market is, of course, China. But then they were threatened by the United Kingdom and by the US because they're in the Five Eyes, which means that if Australia would have signed the contract, actually they signed it the first time, or if they had confirmed the contract to buy the French submarines, they were threatened to be cut off from intelligence sharing on terrorism because they are part of this Five Eyes agreement with the UK, the US, New Zealand, and Australia. So this is a failing empire, and failing empires, it's like a wounded tiger. You know, they're very dangerous, and they can do big damage if we don't take out their teeth. You know.
Now, another point, sir. Do you believe that the U.S. foreign policy is too hostile towards the Chinese?
It is, because it's today I heard that Biden wants to arrange a video discussion with Xi Jinping, but in the same time, every day, you know, there are threats around Taiwan. There are all kinds of things going on, you know, which shows that there are sometimes you believe there are several governments in the United States which obey to different lobbies. So there is, as I said before, there is this military, industrial, and financial complex, which is bankrupt and which is ready to go for a confrontation both with Russia and with China. And even Biden said, I want to get out of Afghanistan to be in a better position to deal with China. So, and then the same person the next day calls President Xi Jinping to discuss nicely. So this is completely incoherent, and they should make up their mind if they want peace or if they want war.
Now coming to you, Dr. Zeng, obviously we do understand that the Chinese, they have a very proper growth model. The achievements, I mean, they're unbelievable. The kind of influence, because they never, even their foreign policy, whenever we would be able to hear the Foreign Office spokesperson, she would always be very polite, to the point. I mean, never ever an aggressive statement that we have heard coming out of China. But sir, the moment we witnessed that the Americans, whether it was Mr. Biden or previously it was Mr. Trump, trade war opened up, hostile approach was adopted, and at the same time we heard from the Americans and their presidents that we have got two adversaries, one is China, one is Russia. So I mean, they have already identified their targets. Do you think, ma'am, at some stage there could be there has to be a solution, but there could be a proper sort of a remedy for this, and this approach, which is pretty hostile towards the Chinese, could be neutralized to some extent, and if so, how? Your take, ma'am.
Hello, thank you for having me. Well, from my point of view, you see, because China is regarded as a rising power and is widely recognized, and a rising power and an existent power and a dominating power. So if we go back to the history, if we look into the history, we're seeing whenever the history, sometimes history rhymes, well, if not repeats, it rhymes. We're seeing in the history when they are conflicting, when they are the dominating when there's a dominating country and a rising power, they always have some conflicts between them. So actually, well, the American holds hostile attitudes to China. I mean, it's understandable they're hostile because they feel that China is a threat. They feel that China is a threat, but actually we are not. We are trying to prove that we are coming rising, we are coming developing in a peaceful way. Okay, we are not going to we never ever in our history trying to invade the other countries, never ever, and we will never do this in the future. So that's the point we want to send out. We want to send out the signal to the whole world. I know when somebody, when the country, when they feel they are threatened, it's really hard to assure them that you are actually yourself, you are not really be threatened by us. It's hard to assure them when they are in that kind of mood. But China is, we are trying our best to sending out that signal. We are coming out peacefully, and we are trying to develop peacefully, and we are trying to help the others, help countries surrounding us, help the other countries in the world to develop together. We are looking forward to a peaceful development. We are not a threat to the world. So what we can say is China is trying their best to sending out the signal. And if we mention about the resolution about the sixth plenum, which has just ended on Thursday, about all these things coming out from this meeting, I could see that by reading those, by reading the public report, by reading the communique released by that meeting, I can see that you can read the plans, the detailed plans of China in that report, and then you will see how determined that China is trying to develop in a peaceful way, is trying to focus, trying to make the future focus on the development, on the cooperation, okay, and on the alliance with all the countries around the world, rather than be posing a threat to the whole world. So this is my point of view.
All right. Now, Jalsa, main area of importance perhaps is Taiwan at the moment, sir. I was surprised to know, sir, that their forex reserves are around $600 billion. Just imagine, twice the total GDP of Pakistan. That's not a joke. So it's such a small country, 60% of the chips they make, which is used everywhere in the world. China would never like to invade Taiwan. But don't you think, sir, some of the Western powers, including the US in particular, they are trying to provoke China in the region, sir, by sending their aircraft carriers in the region, sir. The British, they have also sent one. The American presence is very obvious there, whether you talk about in Japan or you talk about in the South China Sea, or perhaps they are stationed in South Korea also. But, sir, that is the only country which is almost everywhere, all over the globe. Chinese are not. But, sir, the threat that is there perhaps for the Chinese as far as the trade route is concerned, oil and the exports and everything, you see, that could be a potential threat for the Chinese, sir, by all the allies in the region. The issue of islands are there, sir. How do you see that equation?
Well, I think it's the other way around, in the sense that the West thinks, and especially America and the major Western powers, including Taiwan, the present government of Taiwan, thinks that China is very threatening. It is expanding in such a way that it might create problems of navigation. It might create problems for their future economy, and they are in a way threatening the US world as a world power, as a world leader. So I think it's the other way around, that this is how the Americans are looking, and then realizing that China is building its military, its economic power is growing exponentially. They think that it is time to sort of put brakes on it at this time and get more united in order to sort of weaken China, or at least prevent its rapid growth or development. And that is how these people are aligning themselves. So I think it's a very sort of a comprehensive approach towards China by the West, in which of course the US is leading, but the other countries like the ones that you mentioned, Australia and even to an extent Europe and Britain and Taiwan, all these countries are a party to it. And they also think that by aligning themselves with the West, and of course Japan is also with them, aligning themselves with the West, they are also the beneficiaries of greater sort of trade with the West and with America, and better armaments from the US, and sort of a protection by the US as far as the defense protection is.
Sorry to cut you here. Initially, we had no clue what sort of an engagement the Americans have with the Taiwanese. But, sir, there was a statement by none other than the US President, Mr. Joe Biden, where he said, well, yes, we will protect them. We'll protect their sovereignty.
This is a very big change, In the past, no president has ever said that. So this is the first time, because that means they are going to stake a war with China in case there is a conflict. But I hope that won't happen. The Chinese leadership, whatever one might say, they are a very wise leadership.
Absolutely.
And, and they are very right. They have never tried to expand their influence. But as far as Taiwan is concerned, it's a different matter. They think Taiwan is a part of China. And it is the British.
That is a part of the one China policy. Even the Americans believe in that.
Yeah. And then at the same time, as you know, the British were the ones who separated them. Otherwise, they would have been a part of China for always. But now that they have been separated, and there is a strong party over there in Taiwan which thinks that independence suits them, and it has suited them in many ways, because they are pursuing a democracy which they think is much better than the Chinese system. And then their economy, as you rightly pointed out, is flourishing. So, and then the trade between China and Taiwan is also unbelievable, in the sense that it is probably one or second or the third or the
largest trade
partners. So I think these factors are all there, which are sometimes contradictory, and I don't think that there is any possibility of going any further. Both think they have an advantage in keeping a relationship, economic as well as political, but obviously Taiwan does not want to be dominated and overwhelmed by the Chinese supremacy.
Because one thing is for sure, sir, that the Americans, they haven't fought any war on their own soil. Perhaps if there was an attack on the Southern Fleet during the Second World War or 9/11 for that matter. But other than that, they have been fighting all
China,
over.
it's a very different matter.
So exactly. So things are really different. But now coming to you, sir. Mr. Karel, one important factor again, which we have to look into is India. The kind of engagement the Americans have with the Indians in the form of BICA or otherwise, intelligence sharing, transfer of technology. You talk about the use of applications, and again, giving them almost 200 drones to look after the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, and then on top, you name it, and the Americans are ready to, engage them at every level. But one important question that is there, was there, and perhaps will remain there, that if the Americans are preparing India to counter China, and there are so many areas where there are issues with the Indians as far as the Chinese are concerned, LAC, Ladakh, and so many other areas, the bordering areas in particular. Do you think, sir, the Indians, they have the capacity to sort of engage China with the support of the Americans, or this could lead to anything which could be a disaster for the region, sir?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, so I cannot predict the future in absolute terms. My hope is that I think both China and India are great historical civilizations, which in many times, especially during the Silk Road, there was a lot of cooperation among Iran, Afghanistan, India, China. They were all in the same ship. So I hope that there are enough courageous political leaders in these countries who will not get manipulated by interior political issues on one side or the other and make statements which can only inflame the entire region. People should hold back and do as the Chinese, think first and then think on their long-term interests. What hit me in the communique of yesterday of the plenum was the fact that China and the leadership, they are thinking about the next 100 years. They did 100 years of Communist Party and then 100 years of the nation, and then they do their self-critique. They see what was good, what was not so good, what can be done better. I mean, this is the type of thinking I would like to see also in France or in India. People should reflect, and then maybe I think there is a huge opportunity around the Afghanistan crisis to bring people together for a better future and to work on a shared future of common development. If India wants to develop, for example, in the high-tech sector, there's a lot of lithium in Afghanistan. To work with Afghanistan, they need to have a deal with Pakistan. They need to deal with Iran, with Russia. So there is a real window of opportunity to not get into this mousetrap and to really think again a shared future of common development in the interest of all.
And another aspect, sir, since we were talking about this particular area, do you think that after we started hearing about AUKUS, what would be the future of Quad? Because if you remember, sir, when Mr. Joe Biden, in fact, took charge, I'm talking about the current president, I mean, his first and foremost important issue was about Quad. And that was the meeting that was arranged. And about almost a month ago, the Quad members, they met the American president on the sidelines of the UN. Now, what is the future of Quad, sir? Do you think they'll be working side by side, or after the formation of AUKUS, it is going to overwhelm Quad to some extent?
Yes, it could, but it is the submarines, if they are built by Britain and by the US, it will be much more expensive and it will take much more time. It will take at least 10, 15 or 20 years before Australia will get the submarines which France could have built for the next 10 years. So in the immediate time ahead, we will have Quad. And if they get and if they can keep India on board, AUKUS will come afterwards. What's completely destroying the credibility of the United States is that they are changing. They don't respect their own commitments. As in the Taiwan issue, if you look to the Taiwan Defense Act, which was done after, first of all, they replaced Taiwan at the United Nations Security Organization. They replaced it with China, right? And secondly, there was the Taiwan Defense Act, which only engaged the US to eventually help, eventually give some military weapons to Taiwan, but nothing more. It was not a military strategic partnership or a pact or a defense pact. So it's what is destroying, what makes the world very dangerous is that we have people which are not respecting their own commitments. And for example, France is a member of NATO, and then we discovered, 1 month ago, that suddenly the US and the UK, they were dropping France and they were going with Australia and destroying the partnership between France and Australia. While we are supposed to be members of NATO, of the same military alliance. And we were not even told about it. I mean, the French president nearly discovered it by listening to the news, that his big partner, Washington, was putting a knife in his back. So this makes the world very dangerous because and some of these people in Washington, they should go back to school and learn to read, find out what they signed some years ago and respect it.
All right, now coming to you, Dr. Zeng, whatever, we witnessed happened in Afghanistan was pretty interesting, as just mentioned by Mr. Karel, that you cannot, in fact, rely on the commitments made by the United States of America. Whatever they said they will do, they just, in fact, ran out of Afghanistan. Even the Afghan government wasn't informed when they vacated the bases. And since they left Afghanistan in haste and hurry, and see what happened after that, the Taliban took over and there is a problem going on. Now, ma'am, when you talk about the region in particular, and now interestingly, this region, the bordering countries, whether you talk about Russia, you talk about China, you talk about Pakistan, India, and North Korea, 5 nuclear states, ma'am, and almost all the countries border each other. Russia has got a border with the Chinese have a border with Pakistan and India, and Chinese have a border with the North Korean, so does the Russians. Now, looking at this kind of area where there are 5 nuclear states and there is a lot of presence of the Western world, the Americans are there, they have their own adversaries, they have their own partners, and obviously this could lead to destabilization in the region, ma'am. Now, what sort of a role do you see? Obviously, China has its very legitimate concerns when it comes to the Malacca side or otherwise, when I'm talking about the trade route, and they are opening up on the western side, where you're talking about BRI, you're talking about CPEC. And ma'am, the Americans, they have openly asked Pakistan to withdraw, and Pakistan will not. Now, how do you see that particular part, ma'am, the inclination of Pakistan towards the Chinese? Does it mean that it is going to be a problem for Pakistan, that if we take a step towards China, we'll be taking a step away from the US?
Oh, well, actually, it's a difficult question for me. I think China, just mentioned that China has borders with all those, countries with nuclear powers. Well, I think the situation that China the surrounding countries of China, China actually cherish the surrounding countries and cherish the long-term relationship with the surrounding countries. So I think from China's point of view, actually, it's as a Chinese, our personal point of view, Chinese will try to keep the long-term relationship with all the countries, especially when Pakistan is a very important strategic partner and we are friends for a long time. So I think China is going to maintain that relationship and going to open up to the surrounding countries. Well, in terms of the opening up, do you mean the opening up issues to the surrounding countries? I think from the economic point of view, I think China will keep on its one belt, one road policy. We're trying to do this industrial upgrading, and we're trying to promote the innovation, and we're trying to do this technological spillover to our surrounding countries. So I think by keep doing this, by respecting our surrounding countries, by keep doing this economic development with the surrounding countries, I believe that a long-term relationship will be maintained and will be kept very well.
Ma'am, one thing is for sure, whether the Republicans are in power or the Democrats are in power, I mean, the policy towards China is very straight. I mean, to contain China. A lot of people believe that this 9/11 and post 9/11, the presence of the Americans in Afghanistan was perhaps to keep a check on the Chinese expansion in the western side, whether through Afghanistan and in the Central Asian countries, or via Afghanistan and Pakistan into Iran, Turkey and towards Europe. They have already built a railway link that takes all the way from Siberia to the European side. Now, ma'am, this is what China is all about. So multiple opportunities, multiple development ideologies. At that kind of juncture where the Chinese are really looking forward to become the world leading economy, or the economic giant, as we say, why is America feeling so threatened? Is it about the #1 position? Ma'am, we still believe that the kind of firepower the Americans have, it's unbelievable, unparalleled. I mean, keep the whole world on one side, keep the Americans on one side. I think the Americans would be much more heavier in that particular contrast. But when you look at the overall equation, ma'am, it seems that Chinese are very quiet, but yet very committed. Americans are loud, but yet they are also confused. I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, I think China is never seeking the #1 position. I think we always, trying to sending out the signal that we want to be a cooperative country. We want to be cooperating with other countries to develop together, to have a shared future rather than a future dominated by China. So this is China's point of view, and you could see that this is this view is held by Chinese people. We could find the roots in Chinese history, but the U.S., the American view towards China, all I could say probably is just a projection of themselves, because what they did in the history, make them to think that the other countries, the rising powers, are always destined to compete with them with a dominating position. But the things is not like that. They believe that because they used to do that, but China is not going to do that. So they worried about their own image, not about China. They were threatened by their own image, not actually threatened by China, by their imagination of China, of what China is going to do, but not by the real things that China is going to do. China, the real purpose, the real intention of China is to make a peaceful development, is to cooperate with the rest of the countries, is to have a shared future, is to care about the green development, care about the carbon neutral, to be about carbon neutral investment in different industries, to change to the to do this kind of upgrading in its industries, and finally, which will eventually lead to a long-term green development for the whole world. So I think that's my point of view.
Now, Dr. Zeng, one last quick comment. I mean, we have also learned that
Yeah.
Mr. Joe Biden, the US president, and Mr. Xi Jinping, they are supposed to meet virtually on Monday. So what are the expectations? What would be the content of the talks?
Well, I can. Well, from my personal point of view, I actually, I well, from my personal point of view, I think this meeting is necessary because obviously currently these two countries are in a tension. You know, we have tension. We have tension between China and the U.S. So this is a chance for us to sit down and talk. When there is a tension, when there is conflict, actually we can reinterpret it as there is a call for communication, there is a call for negotiation. So sometimes, you know, at this stage, I think it's just the right time for the two leaders to sit down and communicate. And I think when the communication is still there, I don't think the war is only, you know, is approaching. Because when the communication is there, and unless, you know, and we can communicate with each other, that means that, well, things, we will find a remedy together. We will find a solution to this situation together. So actually, I'm quite optimistic at this stage. Yeah.
All right, it's good to be optimistic. And if I may put the same question to you, Mr. Karel, how would you respond to it?
Yes, I think it was a mischaracterization to think that this century will be the Asian century. I think we should work to make it the century of humanity, and not only for the entire humanity, not only for Asia or not only for the United States. I invite all your viewers to join the Schiller Institute on an internet conference this weekend, where we have people invited from Russia, China, Americans, which like to come to the Schiller Institute as a platform for dialogue and exchange, while most of the mainstream media are always bashing somebody, you know. You have to bash, they do China bashing, France bashing, Pakistan bashing. That's their main hobby. So we should come over that, and I think if we can, I think there are sufficient number of people which love each other and which have the brains and the intelligence and the courage to take things in their hands and to make sure that we can survive in a common shared future which will be better.
All right. Jalsab, your take, sir, on the same point that this virtual meeting that is supposed to be held on Monday, what do you see? Do you think this is going to melt the current tensions?
Well, I think it's a good thing that they are meeting because of the recent tensions. But essentially, I think it is meant from their point of view, the American point of view. President Biden has also stated that I'm really meeting him because of climate. We want to cooperate with each other to ensure that, you know, the climate change and the threat of the climate change is sort of, you know, whatever we can do in order to cooperate. And China being such an important country and also one of the largest producers of, gases which are very harmful. They think that the cooperation with China would be very helpful. But at the same time, I agree with you that the very fact that they are meeting after having exchanged such hostile statements against each other, it would be a good gesture and would probably somewhat ease tensions.
All right, so let's hope sanity prevails at the end of the day. Jalsa, thank you so much for your presence. And it was great to have you, Mr. Karel, and it was a pleasure to have you, Dr. Zeng. Thank you so much for your participation. And that's all we have for this week. Inshallah, I'll see you on Monday at 8:05 p.m. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.